Katie Sasso, I guess I don't even know your Schafer. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I don't know your last name.
She
got married recently for me anyway. And I'm Kelly Denney, and we are both PhD students who decided academia was not for us. And we also realized when we were going through the transition, it was a bit of a mystery. And since then, we've also had a lot of people coming to us, asking us questions about how we did this. Because it's something that is not necessarily broadly educated to academic folks who want to get out. So we're here to share kind of some of our experiences and some tips about how to do this transition.
All right, so we're hoping that this will be kind of a practical talk. So not only will you kind of take away just our stories, but I'm hoping that, we're both hoping when you leave here, you'll actually have some practical steps you can use if you are in academia to basically decide what your next move is and a path forward to making it. So as part of that, we thought it might be a good place to start with where we came from, our academic lineage or history, if you will, to give you guys a sense of how different our backgrounds are and how common the spot is we landed in. So I got my PhD from Ohio State. I started in a clinical psychology PhD program. So there was a really big emphasis on academic research and statistics. I did a lot of programming in SAS and R. And I also had therapy hours as well, because I was in a clinical program. So that was a whole nother portion of my degree. And originally I went in and I thought I would be a tenure track professor somewhere and maybe see some clients one day a week and manage a clinic. And about midway through my PhD program, I started to become a bit disillusioned with academic research. It moves really slow, and it's very specific. And the lack of application was a bit disappointing. I was doing research on psychotherapy and randomized control trials. I thought I would change the way therapy was done in practice, but that's not exactly how it works. So, I wanted to kind of see what else my options were. And like you'll hear with Kelly, another piece is I started to really appreciate how limiting the academic job search is, right? So I knew it was very competitive, but I don't think I quite appreciated that you have next to zero decision in terms of where you live. And on top of that, it's very competitive and it's a long road to getting a job. So I thought, why am I kind of hacking away at something that, when really what I like about it is the statistics, the programming, the answering challenging questions, and kind of the focus on the details. So I discovered, thanks to some other folks in my academic lab, that there were some other options open to me in industry. So around my third year of my PhD program, I did this awesome kind of arrangement that Nationwide has with Fisher College of Business, where they actually buy you out of your contract as a PhD student. So usually as a PhD student, you make kind of a meager salary teaching, in addition to your kind of day job and research and studying. So Nationwide buys you out of that contract, and you got to work for their Advanced Customer Insights department, which I think is now the Enterprise Analytics Office. Really loved that experience, worked with some really talented folks, and I realized there's a whole nother venue with amazing job opportunities where I can answer these challenging questions with programming, statistics, and research design, and I'll just have a lot more available to me. So it's kind of off to the races ever since. I did finish my PhD in psychology, but then I went on to work for the Columbus Collaboratory, which is where I'm a data scientist at right now. I'm also pretty involved in women analytics, obviously, and then Our Ladies, which is another meetup here in town. Woo. Yes, I think that was a cheer for Our Ladies. Everybody should attend Our Ladies, male and female in the audience.
All right, so I went a little bit farther into academia than Katie did. I started actually in astronomy and physics, and I knew, immediately out of undergrad, grad school is the only thing for me. So I applied to grad school, came here to Ohio State for grad school, got my PhD here, and immediately after that, I was like, what's the next thing I do? I would do a postdoc. So I applied for postdocs, just like I had like blinders on, like this is the vision, this is what I do. I moved to Europe, I did a postdoc fellowship in Europe. I'm, gung-ho for the research, love my research. I study black holes, this is so cool. Love going to conferences, talking about my research. And did a second postdoc and came back here actually with a National Science Foundation fellowship back at Ohio State, still doing research. But I started actually thinking about it at that point. It's the point where I'm now applying for faculty positions. And I'm starting to get a little bit disillusioned with some of the things that I have to do in this career. And I started to really think about what do I like and what do I don't like about what I'm doing. And I realized that I don't really like writing publications. I love the research. I love working with data. I love communicating the results to people. Really hate writing publications. And in astronomy, it's not just publications, and I guess most academic fields, it's also grant proposals. And on top of grant proposals in astronomy, you have telescope proposals because you have to go to telescopes and get time. There's not a lot of big telescopes to do the research that I want to do. So that means that the number that actually get approved is like 10%. So I have like a 10% chance of getting approval at a telescope, a 10% chance of getting approval in a grant. And if I haven't already got the telescope time, I'm never going to get the grant money because they say, but there's no way you can use this money because you didn't get the telescope time. And then I have to publish. So, I don't really like that. The other thing that I didn't really like was teaching college kids. So basically now, as a faculty member, the two metrics by which I'm judged on success are writing and teaching, and I like neither of them. So I finally realized, hey, maybe I should do something else. But I still love the data. I love the research. I love the curiosity, asking a question, how do I design a solution to this problem that I have, and then be able to communicate that to people who are interested in the answers. And I realized that, hey, I can go into data science, and actually what I'm doing, I can just change the subject matter of my data, and it's the exact same job. And so by just doing data science, which is really applying the scientific method to any data to try and find out answers with this massive data that nobody knows what is of value in it in the first place, I can do the same stuff that I love doing. I just don't have to write papers and teach college kids. So I ended up first I did consulting because I was still like, well, I've done astronomy for like the last 10 years of my life and I don't even know what I want to do. So I did consulting for a while, and then now I've landed, and I'm actually working in medicine. I'm working at a radiology practice. So I run a data science and analytics team in a radiology practice where we build AI tools and help improve patient outcomes for radiology studies. And it is amazingly fun. And I get to communicate, and I get to work with data, and I get to build cool stuff, and be creative, and ask questions, and I love it. So totally the right choice for me. But to get there, out of academia, the first thing you need to do is turn this whole body of your CV, all your academic research, into a resume. And Katie's going to talk about how to do that.
Yes. So, one thing I want to just disclaim is I think both Kelly and I really appreciate and understand the impact that academic research does have. So, for example, statistics papers, those are the foundation of all of the amazing methods that we use every day and just take for granted that those were developed over years and years and years. But I think that kind of narrow-focused and that kind of lifelong commitment to one specific topic, it's not for everybody, and that's okay. Okay, so now practically speaking, talking about research, what do you do if you decide you might want to go into industry and you're in a PhD program? So there's kind of three main things we're going to focus on today. So there's networking piece, there's job search, and then to kind of kick all those off, you need to do something to represent your body of work in a way that's not a 5-page CV. So we actually have, again, we wanted this to be practical, so there are actually handouts of Kelly and I's first ever, don't judge us, our first ever industry resumes from years ago. So this was our attempt to take our academic work and put it into a one-page resume. One page, really tough. So these are just screenshots of my CV, my first ever resume and CV transfer. So I don't think my CV's out there, but you'll have the resume at least. So basically, your main job experience, if you will, is your research experience. So you need to take that and you need to translate that into bullet points that somebody in industry can understand. So one of the main goals, I think, that we kind of landed on in talking is you need to abstract your subject matter, right? So if I started getting into the jargon of psychotherapy and personality pathology, nobody's going to follow me. But what I can do is talk about the statistical methods I use, so something like hierarchical linear modeling or mixed modeling, factor analysis. Those are things that speak to people in industry, right? The idea of using these to predict outcomes, those are things people can follow. Being a study coordinator, that's another thing. Maybe they don't care what the study was, but that's an applicable experience. So basically taking all of these really specific things that were deep into the process of my specific area study, abstracting them away, and then keeping the actual practical things that translate, like statistical methods used, experimental design, and then also your ability to kind of write code and program, which is another essential piece. So kind of the next thing too, I just wanted to mention, so how I did this, so I actually did a lot of academic research in undergraduate as well. I didn't throw that by the wayside. I just put that in as kind of a secondary bullet, undergraduate research associate. And again, I did a similar sort of thing. I featured skills that translate to the industry realm, but abstracted the way the study matter. So I talked about my work in a quantitative psychology lab, but I didn't mention the fact that I ran in program experience where somebody was looking at a tree and just pressing every 2 seconds, right? But I just talked about what I did. I used R to help with the analysis there. Consider a data science skills section. So this is, I think, maybe a nice way to abstract the stuff that folks are going to find valuable about your training. So again, focus on things like statistical methods used, programming. One caveat on the statistical methods, so I think I was in a fortunate position where social sciences research, we use a lot of the same modeling strategies that somebody in industry might understand or recognize, but depending on your PhD program, you might want to seek out some assistance with this. So I recently spoke with a PhD student who had graduated and gotten their PhD in physics, actually. I think a different area than Kelly, but relatively the same. And their subject matter is so narrow that there was actually kind of a barrier in terms of her translating the statistical method she used to something like logistic regression, which we all know in kind of the industry setting. So I had that advantage where I think my lingo translated, but if you don't, we do have a statistical terms cheat sheet on the tables you guys can take with you. And that, I think, will help you get an understanding of what folks in industry know things by. So for this example, this person that I was kind of mentoring and working with, once she got off an interview, she was like, oh, they're talking about this distribution. But she just didn't know it by that name. So kind of get a familiarity with some common business methods that are used, and then translate that back into what you know darn well. Mention programming tools, use your network. So my number one piece of advice, Kelly's gonna speak to this more, is the best thing you can do is find somebody who is closest to your area of academic research who has made the jump into industry, because they will have already gone through this process of translating what they know from their super specific world into a more general context. This is the saddest slide. I actually had a very fun meme, but we're trying to be really above board here, so I had to take it off. I couldn't steal from the internet. So this is your publication section, right? Yeah. It's kind of tough. So this is pages of my finest work and first author publications.
One bullet.
This is what it becomes on your resume. Yeah. It's a little sad. I do still have my publications linked on my LinkedIn, so you can go and look for them if you want. And some jobs will care more about that than others. And in my opinion, a job where you want to be should care about your academic history and your ability to publish peer-reviewed papers. That really speaks to, I think, your critical thinking skills, your statistical methods, your programming. But at the end of the day, you can't list out all your publications. But you can link it, and if you have a physical copy of your resume, you could even do a link to like your Google citations, and that way they could find them there. But yeah, this does need to be condensed, especially presentations. I mean, yeah, I could just go on. This is what I like to call the cutting room floor. These are aspects of my CV that just don't show up anywhere, really. Yeah. So my clinical experience, interesting. To me, that's actually one of the most valuable experiences I got in my PhD program. I always say everybody needs a little therapy, but nobody really cares that I was a therapist. It's not relevant, right? And then just all sorts of other things. So like honors and awards, professional affiliations, teaching experience. I think it's, again, maybe a good bullet point, a good talking point, but you got to make space for additional things.
And some of the stuff, right, you can consolidate down into the other skills that you got from doing these things.
Exactly.
So,
Good
you can
call.
put good communicator, right? Mentoring experience if you helped to teach or to do some of these other things. So it's not that this disappears, it just doesn't go in there like that anymore. And you have to think about what are the transferable skills that you got from those experiences and what are future employers going to want to get about you from that experience in your shortened resume.
That's an excellent point. So actually, I did have kind of bullets that referenced the skills I gained from teaching in therapy, but you abstract them away to something like, interpersonal skills or emotional intelligence in relating to and working with others. So that would be kind of one abstraction there. And then just briefly, I want to make sure we can get to the rest of our content and a ton of questions. You got to get a LinkedIn. So some people don't have a LinkedIn, but I'd recommend a LinkedIn or a GitHub. It kind of depends on what you're going after. If you're going after a super deep technical role, you're going to want to, get your stuff on Git, which probably it already is. And then if you're, looking in industry, I'd recommend a LinkedIn profile. It's just how folks connect in industry. Something that is very foreign in academia. But basically, you're going to want to focus on your kind of skills on your LinkedIn page.
Okay, so now that you have a resume, the next thing you want to do is really focus on that network. What are you going to do with that resume? How are you going to get it out there? Now, when I was leaving academia, I had this horrible misconception that I was finally going to leave that old boys network, that idea that you're only really going to get a job from somebody who your advisor knows or who you've collaborated with in some project in some way, or somebody has told somebody that you're a good candidate for this research position. And I was really wrong. So 60 to 80% of jobs, even in industry, are given to people who know somebody, so a personal reference. And this is why a network is critical. Going to different places to meet people like women in analytics and talk about what you do is critical to getting a good job. And there are a lot of opportunities to do this. So I've kind of just thrown up here ideas. Kind of on the left side of the screen is why you want to network, and the right side is places you can network. But stuff like, and it's not just getting a job, right? It's also talking to like-minded people, right? And trying to get, build new friendships and have somebody to vent to. We, in grad school, right, we had the grad school office, and you could get all your complaints and everything out there. Well, you can't always sit around and do that at your job, but in networking events you can. Go to a happy hour and get advice from somebody, like how do you deal with that really frustrating boss or that coworker on your team who still doesn't want to do any work? Why are they still employed? So get advice. Networking is good for that too, but it's also going to help you get that job. Being able to hand your resume to somebody is really, really important. And where you can find networking opportunities is just amazing. I got a job offer from the person sitting next to me on an airplane one time, just talking about what it is that I do, and they had a need for somebody who did exactly what I did. 90% of the time, I hate talking to the people who sit next to me on the airplane. So, in that kind of case, I'm like, oh, maybe I should take this opportunity more often to network. But it's really just, everybody wants to work with somebody who they know they get along with. And so you meet those people at networking events and you see, who is the type of person that you would fit well with being with them, 8 hours a day. You're going to see them almost more than you see your family. So it's crucial to network. Now, once you've networked and you've found somebody, and you still have to go and apply for jobs. Sometimes you're lucky enough to just get handed a job, but sometimes it's not available and you still have to go. So what do? Now you have to navigate the job ads. And this is really intimidating from somebody coming from academia because it is so different than anything that we're used to. Because in academia, you just have a general, like, here's this opening, apply for it, convince me why. And it's totally open-ended. There's not a whole list of requirements of things that you need. And so the first time going out to look at these things, I'm reading these, I was like, how can one person know all of this? I don't know how to do all of that stuff. Like, you read the title, you're like, yes, that's what I do. And then you go read it and you get through the first paragraph. Yeah, we're looking for somebody with excitement and ready to work with a team. And I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Experience.
That's me. Yeah, exactly. and then you go and you look at the bullet list of like requirements, and I'm like, nope, 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 Okay, I know that one. And it's just like, what? So you look at this huge list and you have to realize that not one person has all of these things. They're not really looking for a unicorn, it's a wish list. So typically, if you know about, say you have some familiarity with about 60% of them and you're really good at, a few of the things that they ask for, apply. Just try, apply. And this is where one of the things that women actually struggle, and I've been to a lot of talks talking about this, because there's two different things that are going on here. One, a lot of job ads are not written for women. Women and men, I guess, feel like a connection or something depending on how job ads are written differently. And there's actually been research that goes into writing job ads that sound more, I don't know, friendly is not the right word, but are going to be more attractive to women applying for them. And most job ads are not written with that in mind. The other thing is that men are more likely to just, they don't care if they have 60%. If they see that one on the list, they're like, I can do that. Yeah, I'm gonna apply for this. And women have a much harder time doing that. I know personally, like, I'm very critical of myself and my skills. And I'm like, if I don't think that I have that skill, then I'm not gonna apply for that job, because I'm like, well, if that's what they need and I don't know how to do that, then I don't feel comfortable doing that. And so it's really a hard roadblock to get over, to just go ahead and do that. But then the other thing is there are so many algorithms out there now. We're like creating an environment that's more difficult for us to get jobs, because there's an algorithm saying, how close is this resume to what this job ad says? How many keywords are the same here? So you actually have to tailor your resume to specific jobs. Look for those skills that they're asking for and see how the skills that you have on a general resume actually fit in with what they've actually asked for. It could be just a synonym question, right? Like, oh, well, I have that skill, but I didn't word it like that on my resume, so let me change that around. The other thing is handing it to a person. This is where the network comes in. You're much more likely to get a job if you can hand your resume to a person. Have a conversation with a person. Go to a job fair, right? You have a friend who works with somebody. Give your resume to that friend to give to their recruiting office. Like that, just being able to hand it to somebody and have a conversation is really increasing the likelihood that you'll get an interview for that job. The last thing is soft skills. We learn a lot of soft skills in academia that we don't realize that we have. So here's just a giant bucket list. Pick out things maybe that sound familiar to you. So there's a lot of focus on the technical skills. How many different codes do you know? How many different languages can you code in? How many different software platforms have you used? And there's a lot of soft skills that we learn in academia that I think are often underrated because they're not explicitly written necessarily on those job ads. You have to read between the lines to see things like how important is critical thinking, how important is communication, leadership, the ability to mentor somebody, the ability to work in a team and collaborate well in order to come up with new ideas. And so a lot of this stuff we get in academia. We get in gaining a Ph.D. is teaching us how to be a professional problem solver, a professional researcher, somebody who's curious and asks questions. And these are things that are really, really valuable that at least when I was starting out, I didn't understand how important they were, and they seemed a bit overrated, and I didn't realize how transferable those skills were. So really think about those soft skills, and employers want somebody with good work ethic. It's amazing today how many stories I hear in my networking about employers with employees who are just like, I don't understand. They don't think that they need to work. So, some of these, like showing you even got a PhD, you know how much perseverance it takes? You know how many telescope proposals I got turned down for and I still submitted one next season? So, that is a skill that is meaningful to an employer. So don't forget about those aspects of things.
So we're going to close with some tips, and then we hope we'll have some time for Q&A. So we will definitely have some time. I'm pretty sure we go to 10:30. So. Yeah. So some tips. So the first one's kind of just high level. This is some things that we kind of both did when we were trying to make this decision. It feels like a really big decision, and it is at the time. So for me, I had to decide to finish out the clinical training or not, which was a big decision for me. So one thing you can do, I think, to help with that is do a written out pros and cons list of making this decision, and do things like time tracking. I'm calling it an activity log. That's what we call it in therapy, actually. When you track your mood and what you're doing throughout the day. So whenever you task change, just make a little note of like emails and your mood, right? And the goal here is, and we're researchers, we do use data, right? Let's take this mood log, do it for several weeks, and then look at the correlation between what you're doing and your mood, right? And so that was one thing we both kind of did where we said, what are we doing that we really love here? And I think for both of us, those data science skills of programming, answering difficult, challenging questions really fell out. And some other things too. So like for me, I didn't want to just work at a computer all day. I wanted to make sure I had that interaction with individuals, which I think industry surprisingly can offer you. Yeah. And then I think the other thing is don't fall prey to the sunk cost effect. So this is another common cognitive error that us humans tend to make, right? So it's this idea that you tend to stick with something even when it's not the optimal decision to make, just simply by the fact that you've invested time or energy into it. So the kind of classic example is you're waiting for the bus and it still doesn't come, it's late, and there's a better way for you to get wherever you're going, but you're like, well, crap, I've already been waiting for 10 minutes. So this is a big thing, right? You've just invested so much of your life into getting this academic degree. So just be mindful of that. And then on the other point, I think my last thing for me is in networking, there is a kind of right and wrong way to do it. Be mindful of others' time, depending on who you're working with. So if you know somebody on a personal level, I think you can, ask accordingly in how you utilize their resource. So getting lunch or something with somebody you know well makes perfect sense. If you're reaching out to somebody kind of cold, so either via LinkedIn or at a conference, you might suggest or ask for something a little bit lighter at first, like a phone call or coffee. Lunch is kind of heavy. It's a lot of time. I think there's a right and wrong way to kind of go about that. In general, go for it. But if you're just meeting somebody for the first time, maybe start with kind of a phone conversation or coffee instead as an ask of their time. And then we already mentioned this, but for your resume skills, focus on the general techniques you applied to data and answering questions. Abstract the subject matter.
Yeah, so I threw this one up here just because this was an example for me that,
good.
My research was like, I didn't measure masses of extragalactic supermassive black holes using reverberation mapping techniques. That's never going on a resume. I don't care how cool it sounds and how much fun it was doing it. They're gonna read it, they're not going to remember anything, right? But I did apply time series analysis to data that I sampled, cleansed, and analyzed or modeled with statistical methods in order to extract meaningful trends. So you can pull a whole bunch of pieces out of there that somebody can apply to any subject matter that you may be applying for, and then they can see relevant terms and skills that it took in order to do that first thing that they don't know what that means. So think about it in terms of that. You can talk about yourself as being a subject matter expert, right? Gaining that skill, learning really deeply about a subject is important. They don't care what it was about. You can get into talking about that in an interview, and they're gonna ask you what you did. And so then that's where you are gonna need to practice saying the first thing in a way that they do understand. And of course, I have ways to say that at various different technical levels, but it doesn't need to go on your resume. And then the other thing here is, again, this is connected more to the soft skills, but don't assume that anybody in a recruiting office or hiring managers have any idea what it actually means to get a PhD. Like that is I think it's changing a little bit with how many of us PhDs are now going into industry, but it's still a lot, like go to job fairs and talk to them and they're like, whoa, a PhD. I'm like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But they don't know what it means. They don't know what it takes. So you really have to lay that out. You have to sell your skills on your resume and in interviews and really, show them what it means to actually have gotten a PhD. And then the other thing that was really hard for my office mate and I when we were looking is you're not looking for that one job anymore, right? In academia, you're looking for that tenure track position. I'm gonna get this one job and I'm gonna be done. You're not doing that anymore. So don't think that when you're trying to go and find your first job, it's gonna be where you're gonna be for the next 10, 15 years of your life. It's not what it's like anymore. I've been out for 2.5 years and I'm already in my second job So it's, it's a much faster pace. Things change, people change, you change your mind, you get new opportunities. And so don't look at it like that. And finally, just you can consider a recruiter or a headhunter. They do have a network when you don't. They don't necessarily understand how to translate your skills like you do, but they can be helpful in helping you navigate the new network and the new environment that you're trying to look in. So finally, we'll just throw up here some resources. I don't know if you want to write down the entire URL, but at least little bits of it, just ideas of where to go to help with resources. And otherwise, we're happy to answer questions.